Hi everyone, and welcome to the REFSIX Weekly podcast and vlog. This show is all about refereeing news and topics in refereeing, and we'll talk amongst ourselves, me and John, as well as get some guests on to chat about some topics. So welcome everyone, and thanks for listening in. I'm going to just quickly run through two pieces of news from the refereeing world that I've seen, and actually both relate to female referees. So the French UEFA or FIFA referee Stephanie Frappard, who did the UEFA Super Cup last year and the Women's World Cup final last year, has been appointed to a men's Europa League game between Leicester City and Ukrainian team, which I'm going to definitely mispronounce, Zoria Luhansk, on Thursday. So that's a great appointment. Amazing to see female referees getting into the elite side on the men's side. So that's great to see. Another one was Caroline Chennard, who's a Canadian, decorated Canadian FIFA women's referee, decided to retire this week. She had done Olympics Games finals, World Cup matches all throughout, a massive kind of history in the female game, and she'll be sorely missed. So some news from around the world. So let me introduce you to my colleagues for this week's show. So I've got John.
Yeah, hi. You've seen me in the other couple from Sussex, level 4, still unfortunately.
And then we've got Mike.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm a 2B referee from Sussex.
Brilliant. And Red.
Hi guys, Red Egan, level 5 referee from Sussex. Looking forward to the podcast, first time. So thank you, John, for getting me in.
Brilliant. So very Sussex-based group today, very local, but definitely social distancing and all on Zoom. So we'll do that. How was your games this weekend? Whereabouts were you? Anyone can go first.
Go on then. I'll go. So Saturday.
Go on. There we go. The internet's killing us.
Yeah, the lag.
Yes. I had a trophy game today. Not today, Saturday. Hayward Heath versus Willing Garden in I want to say it's the second round of the qualifying for the trophy.
Okay.
4-1, pretty easy. I think there's 3 yellows. I was on the line, senior. Brilliant. So it's a pretty easy day for me.
Cool. Red, you were chomping at the bit. Go for it.
Well, yeah. So I had an SCFL Div 2 game, Littlehampton United versus Rustington. Went well, to be fair. Both bit of a fiery game, but managed to see it through. It was a bit of a shock. Littlehampton, who were near the bottom of the table, beat Rustington, who were top 2-1. So that was an unexpected outcome. But yeah, enjoyed the game, and it was managed to see it through, which is the main thing. So it was all right.
Mike, where were you at?
National League South last Saturday, Eastbourne Borough against Chelmsford. Enjoyable game down on the 3G pitch at Eastbourne. Obviously, our games have still got quite an interesting feel to them at the moment, being behind closed doors. But both sets of players, technical areas, club officials, we're just knuckling down and getting on with it. And certainly that's not impacting on the quality of football at our level. So whilst we all hope spectators will return to stadium soon, at least we've still got some light relief with football we have got to enjoy.
And it's really interesting because I guess all of your games you've had normal amount of fans, I guess, not a huge amount, but a few.
Probably have more, to be fair.
Okay.
Oh yeah, definitely. At the county league level, there's definitely a higher number of people. Like I had 250 at Peacehaven.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which is probably more than I've ever had there ever.
Okay. And Mike, I guess for you, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do concur with John's thoughts in that, having looked at some of the non-league attendances, and I still try and keep an eye on what's going on in the local scene, there's definitely been an increase. For clubs at Isthmian level that are ticketed only, more often than not, I'm seeing kind of sellouts. A couple of times I've tried to get tickets for Lewis on a Tuesday night after work, and it's been a complete sellout. So certainly supporters that would tend to be going to, step 2 and above are going to step 3, 4 and so on. So it's good to see. But yeah, I mean, at our games, league matches are obviously all behind closed doors, bar club officials and some volunteers. I did have an FA Cup game 2 weeks ago where the home club were classed as non-elite Gosport Borough, so they could have spectators, but the away club, Hereford, classed as elite, so none of their spectators could attend. And it just adds, just a completely different dynamic, to be honest.
So just on the game with no fans there, is it easier to referee, or is it exactly the same, or is it even more difficult? What?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier or harder to referee, but certainly in terms of acoustics, you hear a lot more. You're able to communicate with players, I would say, a lot easier. You pick up on a lot more which is being said by the technical areas. And it's interesting, before I went off to the game on Saturday, I was watching Jose Mourinho being interviewed on Sky Sports. And he seems to think that, one of the upsides to spectators not being in stadiums is that he feels he can coach better. So he can get a message to a player on the far side of the pitch far easier than what he could do beforehand when there was kind of tens of thousands of spectators there. So they're just different dynamics. But what I found in experience is once the game kicks off, players switch into game mode, and it's as you would normally see with a full set of supports there.
Brilliant, cool. Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed fans get back to the stadium as soon as possible. Obviously, pandemic pending, I guess, or whatever, but fingers crossed. So we've got quite a packed show in terms of topics. There are three things that I want to touch upon, so I'll just quickly highlight them now. So there was a story in a local newspaper about a non-league game between Worcester City and Coventry United, and it basically included the manager saying that the referee had sworn at one of his players, and he took obviously offence to that. So I want to chat about swearing at players. Is it a complete no-no? Should it ever happen? So we'll talk about that. One massive kind of viral moment from the Premier League game this weekend. There was a few, but the one that we wanted to touch on was around the interaction between Sergio Aguero and the assistant referee, Sian Massey-Ellis. There was a kind of a coming together or a gesture from Aguero to Sian Massey-Ellis, and we'll talk about that and how we would maybe what we would do in those situations in our games. And then in the WSL, there was a game between Everton and Brighton where it appeared that a player was given 2 yellow cards and not shown the red card. So we're not going to go into detail on that incident, but we're going to talk about how we can maybe prevent that happening in our game. So those are the three topics we're going to touch on. Should we just start from the first one, swearing at players? It's a very interesting kind of accusation. We don't know if it was true or not. And to be honest, we don't care if that was true or not. I'm just really intrigued to know, have you ever sworn at a player? Maybe we could go around there, and then we'll go into detail. Have you ever sworn at a player?
It's tough. It depends what you class as a swear word, really. Like, I use shut up occasionally, which can get me into trouble, but swearing has become such a part of everyday life and sport, and like you hear it on the TV, you hear it in, I don't know, like TV shows now. Like, I use it with my friends quite a lot. It's like part of my everyday language. Yeah. So trying not to bring that onto the football pitch is quite difficult, especially when some of the players are giving it to you. Like, my instant reaction is to give it back. Yeah. But then this shows, like, doing that does not help you at all, is it? Because it's such a double-edged sword. Yeah. Like, they can do it to you, but you can't do it to them, and it probably doesn't help you that much. But
yeah, I'll talk about my experience. But Red or Mike, do you want to go? Have you ever sworn at a player?
So, in recent memory, I'd say no. And I think the interesting part of two of the topics we're going to touch on today, is the image of the game and kind of the credibility of the game as a result of those particular actions taking place. And, from my personal perspective, I don't see any value that can be gained through swearing at a player. We're always in the mindset of trying to calm people down, trying to build rapport, and I just don't see any value that can be gained in telling a player to F off or whatever it might be. I can only see that inflaming the situation. So in recent memory, no, it's not something that I adopt as part of my management style. But that's just my personal opinion. I'll throw it open to the guests.
Yeah. Go on, Red.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you can agree with both points in a sense, with John almost saying it's a double-edged sword of players, that they're going to come at you with a swear word. Sometimes you might think, well, how come he can say that, how come I can't? And then I'm going to get in trouble in a sense. But then you look at Mike's points as well. Again, as a referee perception, you want to be out there managing the players with almost use of words, use of communication. And by throwing a swear word at a player might not get used to a referee throwing a swear word, and they might react in the complete opposite way. And that's probably what's happened in this incident. That's what happened. The manager's almost been like, well, hang on a second, why is the referee throwing the swear words out when he can use his voice, he can use other tools to manage the game and kind of see it through. So in recent memory, I can't remember a time when I have sweared at players. I've used other words, like as John said, like, shut up, come on, like, what are you doing? Like, any chance kind of thing. And things like that, almost like, why the hell's that coming out? But no, again, I can't think of a time when I've said a swear word back to a player. You probably have to piss me off quite a bit if someone was going to throw that at me. But then again, if the perception of a referee, you got to keep a cool edge. You got to manage them throughout the match, and then hopefully that'll work in your favour, and you can see the game home in a sense.
I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate here. I think it comes down to the tone of what you're saying as well. So like, if you're having a joke around with the player and it's a bit of fun, and like you're having a bit of banter, as everyone says, and you say, oh, F off, like something very offhand, very gentle, like in a joking way where it's just you and that player, I think you can get away with that. But as soon as that tone changes from, actually it goes from a jokey banter where you're building a rapport with the player to a like an order or being authoritative, I think that's when it definitely crosses the line. It's interesting that you both said shut up, because actually that's probably the one thing I've said that has led to one of my biggest, probably the worst experiences in refereeing that I've had, is a ball went out of play and the team that were going to get it took a long time, and the opposition were being fairly aggressive and basically wanting me to give the player a yellow card on Sunday League football, which is like ridiculous for delaying the restart of play at like 30 minutes gone. But this player was basically screaming at me saying, you know, hurry them up, and probably use a few swear words himself. And I turned around really sternly and said, shut up. Like, to the point where I was almost treating that player as if he was like a 5-year-old kid that just took me over the edge. And that turned him into telling me I'm an effing C, which then led to me obviously having to give him a red card. So I felt like I'd baited him into it. He shouldn't have done it. It doesn't excuse him giving me any gestures. I told him to shut up. But I think tone is massively important. The way you communicate isn't just about the words you use, but the tone you use. And there I judged the words and tone wrong. But yeah, it's interesting to hear your points.
I think you make a good point though with like building rapport with players.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like, I don't know what it's like for Mike at the high level, but Red probably down the same. Like, we ref the same teams almost every week. Ref probably does the same on the Sunday League. I know that he seems to do the same teams every week from what he tells me. But you build that rapport with the player, so you know what you can get away with and what you can't. And sometimes you slip the tongue and you be like, oh, shut up, will you? And he'll be like, yeah, fine. But they understand that, and you've got that relationship with them, and it benefits you. Like, I've had players come up to me and be like, you know what I'm like, talk to me, deal with me. And sometimes dealing with them at that level, which is potentially a swear word or potentially like get out of my face, like being a little bit more aggressive, helps your match control because that's their level.
Yep.
So,
yeah, go on, Mike.
And I think in terms of those confrontational situations, there's an expectation by neutrals that we rise above it, and we almost set ourselves as a higher standard. And certainly, you know, if you was to take yourself out of that confrontational situation, of the 21 other players that are on the field of play who are calm, you know, they'll have their own view of how their player is behaving or how an opposition player is behaving. So I think that it will be more of a shock to them to see the referee almost be baited himself into fighting fire with fire, rather than saying, look, I'm the professional one here, you're not, and this is how, you know, I'm going to be the calming influence in that situation. You know, it's almost like if you was at school and you was ever to hear your teacher swear, it would come as a huge shock, because I think, you know, referees, as opposed to players or managers or any other kind of participant, they are held to a higher professional standard. And of all of the 1,000 things we've got to worry about during the 90 minutes, I think probably the way in which swearing might be perceived is probably quite low on our priority list. So that's why I tend to just avoid it, really.
I think they're all great points, really. It's basically using your understanding how you want to communicate with players, but also, to build a rapport or to control the players or to manage. But also, to Mike's point, is there is also the perception of not just that one-to-one communication, but the whole pitch, the whole team of players, as well as any spectators that you might have. So it's not just about that isolated incident anymore, especially when you get up to your level, Mike.
And I think the culture's gone out of the Premier League as well. When I first started refereeing, you had your Phil Dowds of this world that were renowned for, fighting fire with fire and were almost kind of over aggressive in the way in which they manage players. Whereas if you look at top flight officials now, your Olivers, your Taylors, etc., you just don't see any of that Dowd persona being shown.
Even Kalina persona, right? Which was similar,
yeah. Completely come out of the game now.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. All right, so I feel like we've got a few different opinions there around swearing, basically a no-no, but on the odd occasion, maybe depending on your relationship with the player, depending on the tone and things like that. So, but it's really interesting. I found that obviously the local newspaper picked it up and the manager has made a comment. But I guess there is no place or ability for the referee who was accused of that to make, like, that doesn't sell the newspaper, right? Where a referee turns around and says, hey, actually, I didn't do that, but I haven't seen that story around. So have you guys ever had anything like that where there was something been said about you in a newspaper or on social media and that you didn't, it was unfair because it was from that perspective, but you didn't have an opportunity to kind of voice your own? Has that ever been something you wanted to do?
Yeah, there was a guy going around like reporting loads of non-league games, and he came to my game and he caught me twice.
Yeah.
And he interviewed the managers, and both managers said I had a shocker, basically.
Yeah.
And they were saying, I'm making up the rules as I was going along, like telling them one thing and telling them another. I was like, well, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But obviously my side of the story doesn't sell.
Yeah.
And similarly with this thing, you never hear of that coach, he saw the referee 3 times, calling it this, that, and the other, he was bullied at school. But you won't hear that side of the story because that's natural.
Yeah.
But as soon as it's flipped around.
I do find this particular story interesting, right? Because no doubt that there was at least one player from both teams have sworn at the referee during that game. Almost certainly, right? Like, it does happen. So it's really interesting that got picked up and actually became a story. Have you guys had any kind of interactions with, like, media from a negative aspect?
I mean, to be honest, the fact that is it a local newspaper?
It was a local, yeah.
I mean, the fact that they've picked up that story and run with it probably says more about the quality of that game.
That's true.
Than probably anything else. I mean, in terms of negative experiences with the media, touch wood, it's not been too bad. But one occasion that does stick in my mind was 4 seasons ago now, when I had a bad injury occur in a game at Burgess Hill against Dorking Wanderers, where sadly a Dorking Wanderers player was severely injured through what was a completely innocuous head clash, and the video evidence that was produced afterwards showed that. But the way in which the Dorking manager reacted to that, and the way in which he went to the press was, insinuating that his player had been assaulted, for want of a better word. So that's where, I tend to steer clear of social media or anything that's said in the press, because, very rarely is it based on fact.
It's more, you're only getting one side of the story, right? That's the issue. And like I said, no one's coming to you guys with a microphone after the game or a pen and paper. So.
No one cares either.
No.
Ultimately, once they've got their story and the rant's taken place, no one really cares what the referee's view is.
I don't think you do yourself any favours though, as well. It's trying to chase it. I know I'm my own worst person after the game. Like, it's bad, but again, I'll look on like the social media pages of like things that have gone in throughout the game. And again, I think all refs have done that. Well, they'll go, oh, did I have a good thing there? And I think it's almost trying to please yourself in a sense. But if you're then going to fire back on your Twitter going to some random person with just a fake name and everything, then you're not going to do yourself any favours. You're going to gain yourself, you're almost going to start a war which you're not going to win, because they're constantly going to keep prodding you just for you to say something stupid. And then next thing you know, that's going to get spread wider. So I think we all do look for that, almost that news from that game.
Reassurance.
Yeah, the reassurance. But you're going to do yourself no favours trying to fight fire with it. Whether you go, no, actually that didn't happen. But
and the reality is, it's not just clubs who can be our biggest critics. It can be our own colleagues as well. And we all know certain social media platforms and certain, groups that disguise themselves as support groups who are probably more vociferous with the way in which they criticise the referee and the FA and certain aspects of that walk of life than some of the clubs are. So, I just think social media in general can be a bit of a cesspit for people to voice opinions. So where we can steer clear of that, it's probably for better, really.
So the advice is don't go looking for it, because in truth, no club and really no spectator is ever going to say the referee made a great decision there. They're never going to say what a great advantage. It's like very rare, right? So don't go looking for it. And then if you do find it, don't engage, basically, is the moral of the story. Cool. All right, so we'll move on to the Premier League match between, I think it was Man City and Arsenal, if I remember rightly. And there was an incident, I think it was... I need to do some extra research before these for next week, but I think it was the first half. Might be wrong. Might be completely wrong there. Where there was a challenge by the assistant referee in the far corner, where it could have gone one way or the other, but it looks like it was a throw-in to Arsenal, and that's what Sian Massey-Ellis gave. Sergio Aguero, great striker, took offence to it slightly, had a bit of a conversation. As Sian Massey-Ellis was walking away, made a kind of a gesture or a grab onto her shoulder to slightly pull her back, right? That was roughly what happened. And this kind of created an absolute storm on social media from a variety of different perspectives, actually. So there was one side of the story was it was highly disrespectful, potentially even, going to the extremes of sexual assault, and should have been dealt with a red card. The other side of the argument was actually it was just a normal gesture, it was just a normal piece of contact, etc. So conscious of the fact that we're all guys on this show, we can't really have an opinion from that female perspective. And I've been seeing on social media, those views are from both male and female at both sides of the spectrum. So to me, the outcome from this is it's based on your tolerance levels and your judgment. All we'll say on this from this particular incident is Sian Massey-Ellis is highly experienced. She's a FIFA assistant referee, and she dealt with it in the way that she deemed that situation should have been dealt with, which was just a brush away and carry on with my job. But what I want to chat about is let's take this incident and put it in our games, whether it's a female or a male assistant, and let's talk about you being the referee and you being the assistant referee. What do you think? Is this normal contact? Is this contact that needs, what level of engagement as an official do you kind of respond to this type of contact? So, Red, do you want to start?
Yeah, go on then. So I did see it, and to be honest, it's not the first time you've seen almost like a player have a conversation with the line or have a conversation with the referee and they've got a bit close and they've almost made contact with the shoulder. You see the old famous Mike Dean one, give the look and going, what the hell are you doing? Like, get your arm off kind of thing. With this one, I was a bit bemused about the reaction, to be honest. I mean, I'm as an assistant referee, I'm happy for a player to come and have a conversation. When the arm gets on the shoulder, I don't see the need for it. But again, I don't think there should be any action taken towards it. I think if my assistant referee was really disgruntled, obviously they've got comms, they've got buzzers, they can alert it. But if we need to have a conversation about it, then I would discuss what's happened. I might not have seen it because it might have been a further out play. But in my view, I think if the assistant referee was actually disgruntled, maybe have a conversation just with the player. Just say, look, I'm happy to conversate and happy to talk about what happened and why it wasn't given. But the second you start putting hands on referees, I don't think that's acceptable. I think there's a line for conversation. But I think it's just, I I don't think anyone on the pitch is expecting potentially a caution. I think on the TV cameras, it doesn't look great. But I think just maybe a one-to-one conversation saying, look, you wouldn't do it to myself. You're not going to do it to the assistant referee. And I think just if you can manage it from now, I think it would look good. Just as if someone was to ask the question as to why didn't you do anything, you can show to everyone, just spectators, that I've had a conversation with him, and that's not acceptable. So that's just my view on it. And I think that's what probably the outcome I'd do if my assistant referee was disgruntled on the day, potentially, with what just happened.
Brilliant. Cool. I think that was a good rundown. Go on, Mike. You got any difference there?
I think Rev made some really good points there. And it's interesting the point you made, Hassan, around us all being male and us having, obviously a male point of view. I mean, I don't know Sian Massey personally. I've seen her once at a conference, but never had a personal conversation with her. And I don't think she would want this to become a row of male and female, or about gender, if that makes sense. I mean, she's worked tirelessly to try and break down those barriers and be seen as an equal. So I don't think she would want this to become a gender argument. For me, as I said earlier, it's about how do we want the image of our game to be portrayed, and what damage does something like that do to the credibility? And I think you can condemn something without blowing it out of proportion. And I think as a rule of thumb, as a best practice, you just don't have physical contact between officials and players. Even more so in the time that we're living through of COVID, where, space and no contact is being encouraged, that would be heightened even more so. But yeah, I think it's a respect thing. In the same way you wouldn't necessarily go up to a policeman or a teacher or a person in a position of authority and just start rubbing them around the back of the neck or whatever it might be, and it comes back to that point we made earlier around what value is it adding, by Aguero, it just doesn't add anything to the game. It just brings it a little bit into disrepute. I don't think it's needed. But that being said, I don't think it needs to be blown out of proportion. I thought Sian dealt with it extremely well. In fact, she made one of the all-time great Premier League players look a bit silly, really. And I think, between that, maybe a private apology between Aguero and herself, I think that's kind of case dealt with, and we move on. I don't think someone like Aguero is a repeat offender for things like this. I mean, if he was doing it every week, you might go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? But yeah, I think we need to see it in the sphere that it needs to be viewed in. But it does, full practice and move on.
Perfect. John, do you have anything on that?
I've had it happen to me, like player apparently your arm around you, and I would do the exact same thing as she did, but I'd give him a dirty look at the end. I'd be like, you give him the back, you're like, don't touch me.
Yeah.
And that's basically what she did. Shrugged off and be like, no thanks, mate.
Do you think, so I'm coming back to adding some random questions in, but do you think the temperature of the game makes a difference? So it seemed to be, again, I'll do better research next time, but it seemed to be fairly early. It was a pretty straightforward game. But if there was 2 or 3 red cards in the game, it's really high with temperature, does that make a difference? Do you go with a card, or do you make that public abolishment a lot more kind of vociferous for everyone to see, or not?
No, I think it's player. How hyped up the player is.
Yeah.
So the tempo of the game could be rallied up, but you as an assistant, I could be pretty calm on the pitch, and I could just wrap my arm around you anyway. The tempo of the game is still high, but I'm still fairly calm. Whereas the game could be calm and I'm rallied up, and then I'm starting to. I think it's how the player is rather than the tempo of the game.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last question I have is, so I saw some comments that said, from referees that said, look, anyone who touches me as a referee, as an official, is a red card, right? That some people have said that, which, they're obviously entitled to their opinion. Some people found that gesture from Aguero was aggressive, right? And it could be deemed to see, you could deem his gesture to be aggressive or not. My question to you as referees, I'm the assistant referee, and I've gone down the line of, you haven't seen this incident. I flagged you over and said, I've just been aggressively kind of touched or like pushed or pulled by a striker, and then I guess what is your decision there? Especially if I don't know what your pre-match looks like, but if I'm saying, look, I think I'm using the words aggressive, violent, maybe, you're starting to think red, right? But like, what would you do in those situations?
I think if your assistant has drawn to your attention that they've been violently pushed by a player, I think you'd have to send the person off. I think that's the only course of action you could take. I don't think you could downgrade to a yellow in that situation, if that's the kind of language that they've used to describe the incident. And I don't think you could take no action at all. Ultimately, it comes down to your discretion in terms of how you want to categorise something. And it's interesting what we were talking about in terms of disciplinary action, because if you're cautioning, what are you cautioning for? Is it C1, doctrine aggressive action?
Yeah, that's what I would have gone down.
Is it C2, dissent by word or action? So, and I think particularly if you had an observer there and you had to justify that, you'd need to be really clear on the basis of what are we taking a disciplinary action on. But that being said, I mean, if you deem that to be a violent act, then you have to follow with the red card.
Cool. So overall, again, just to surmise, it sounds like what Sian did was exactly what she wanted to do at that time. She is way better placed to make a judgment than we are. But from our perspective, it's probably the right kind of outcome from that incident. You potentially look at maybe making a more public, warning to the player to say that's unacceptable, but doesn't need to go further than that. Potentially no card. So that's roughly what the consensus is. Is that fair summarization of what we've just chatted about?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Cool. So welcome back everyone to the REFSIX Weekly podcast and vlog. We've just been talking about the incident between Sian, Massey-Ellis and Sergio Aguero. So we're now going to move on to giving 2 yellow cards in a game and not following up with a red card to the same player, right? So that's an incident that happened in a game in the WSL this weekend. Again, we don't care about that game. That is an incident that happened with those officials. We don't know the story, right? So all I care about is, as a group, what I want to know is how do we prevent that incident happening in our games? What kind of tools do you have? What teamwork and what communication do you have with your officials? So, Red, do you want to start again with maybe talking about what your process is for giving yellow cards and how you ensure or try and ensure that doesn't happen in your games, whether you have assistants or not?
Yeah, well, I think just if you're going to do yellow cards, I think it's just following the correct process of, I know it's the same old, people like to throw quick yellow cards around, which I'll come on to in a second, but pretty much taking the name down, checking the number, it all matches on your team sheet, which you've wrote down, and then issuing the yellow card, making sure the player's close to you as well. It's just following good practice again. If you've got observers there and to the general public, or if you've got someone there watching you, they know who the yellow card is. And also if your assistants, obviously if you've just got your assistant on the far side who's done a full match record for you, not having a fourth man, they can note down who it is, and even a visual note of the assistant on this on the far side, who would maybe not, I don't know what your pre-match would be, but mine would just be eyes and ears and just goals. With obviously this could probably most likely happen if you're going to throw a quick yellow out. Probably the only time I'm going to really look if a quick yellow is going to come out, if it's going to de-escalate the situation, i.e. a promising attack, a pull of the shirt, and obviously it might be a bit of an uproar because they might have been on the attack. That's the only time I might throw a yellow card. And still, with that time, I'm going to take my time with the free kick setup, make sure I get that name down. It's all in my book. With this obviously, so that's just my procedure with 2 assistants. With the fourth man and how trying to prevent it, just following the best practice, really, just making sure you've all got your notes, you're all set and you're ready, and just taking your time with it. Because then again, the game's not going to start till you're ready, so make sure that you're set and just you've got it all in your notebook ready so that you can have a visual note throughout the rest of the match. If the next tackle comes in, it's that person.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Mike, any different in your process?
No, not particularly. I mean, we spoke about about this yesterday, Hassan, when we were going through topics, and I would always tend to avoid flashcards for cautions. I think getting into that kind of traditional routine of correct cautioning procedure will serve you well, not just with the game and the clerical procedure, but with observers. There's a case to be made on some few occasions for flash red cards to try and defuse a situation. You see it particularly at mass confrontations. But a combination of probably concentration and flashcards tends to be where a lot of these incidents stem from. You know, the incident specifically, which was the one from the WSL at the weekend, you know, there was 4 officials on those games, which creates an even different dynamic to what we would normally see on a match day where there's only 3 officials. So that's where I am at the moment, and we can touch upon that in a second in terms of, you know, what the procedure would have been in game.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I'm super interested in is, let's just assume you as Mike, you're a specialist referee now, right? So you're no longer running the line. What I'm intrigued by that dynamic, right? Because as an assistant referee, I've seen the referee, I believe, has made a mistake, right? And then I've got myself, the other assistant, and possibly the 4th official, and you know, we've got to figure out a way to communicate to the referee. Let's assume there's no comm skip. Let's get away from comm skip, because most of us don't have a comm skip on a game. There's some doubt that appears as the assistant to say, have I messed up? You know, have I actually made this note correctly? You know, because 9 times out of 10, 999 times out of 1,000, the referee has made the correct call. They've given the second yellow and it's done. But on that, you know, 0.1 or 0.01% of times, there's some doubt that can creep into you as a teammate of the referee to then actually cause big attention by flagging and saying, hey, referee, come here, I think you've made this mistake. So have you ever been in that situation, or can you feel about those situations and think about how you as a referee or how you as an assistant referee would navigate them? Go for it, John.
As an assistant, this is a game-changing decision. And even if there's doubt in my mind that I've messed up somewhere, like if I'm writing on pen and paper, I'm calling the referee over, because like I said, it's game-changing. If I am made to look stupid and I'm in front of the benches, I go, sorry lads, I wrote something wrong.
Yeah.
But if I'm right, then the referee's been bailed out. Do you know what I mean? So either I'm going to look stupid or the referee's going to look right. In terms of refereeing, I'm lucky enough that I use REFSIX. So
nice. Nice plug.
Yeah, nice plug. It tells me that mistake shouldn't happen unless I've really, really messed up along the way.
Yeah.
So that's where that helps. But in terms of what these two have both said, it's process, isn't it? Your process is the most important thing. You stay, you hold, you look at the number, you take your time. It's on your time. And these two have both said it as well. So Red has, I want to say Red's a 5. Red, you're a 5, yeah. And Mike a 2B.
Yeah.
Their thought process is the same. It's all about that process to get it right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, Mike, you were an assistant referee as well. So, like, I guess, has it ever happened to you? And is your process exactly the same as John's there? Or do you doubt yourself as an assistant if that happened?
So, thankfully, you know, touch wood, I've never had this specific example happen to me in a game or felt that the referee was running the risk that this might happen. But refereeing a game of football or delivering a game of football has to be a collective responsibility. And even though ultimately in that situation from the game at the weekend, the referee is, you know, the last port of call, they're the ultimate responsibility taker, the buck has to fall to either all 3 officials or all 4 officials. And I specifically remember a game in my second to last season of running the line. I remember where we were. I can't remember the away team. It was at Sutton United, and the assistant coach was there, Ralph Bone. And the referee called the physio on, got the player treated, and then for some reason the player didn't go off and play restarted. And nothing happened, and it was innocuous, and you know, that was it. But afterwards, Ralph absolutely hammered me and the other assistant because he said, if the referee's made a mistake, which is clear cut, black and white, you know, because there's a clear outcome here, either the player should be sent off or he shouldn't, the player should leave the field or he shouldn't, you have got as much a responsibility to put your head above the parapet and say, this needs to be done, as anybody else. So that would be where my disappointment would be, because people make mistakes, you know, we don't note things down, but that's why you have assistants, you know, that's why you have fourth officials there, you know, so that if you do make a mistake, someone is there to kind of catch you. And I can't comment on what happened at the weekend, and I really feel for the referee in that situation, because nobody would want to be themselves there. But the four of them have to take responsibility in that incident as to why wasn't that flagged.
And Red, do you want to talk about how you, like, what you would say to, let's say I was going to be your assistant this weekend. How would you in your pre-match describe to me, like, if this ever happened, how I should get your attention or how I should get involved?
Well, what, just with mistaken identity or something?
Anything like this, yeah, exactly.
Well, I think, again, if you were a referee, sometimes you kind of know that you've made a mistake with giving out a yellow card or something. If you've given someone, sometimes you can almost be aware of the situation. I think also it's, again, as Mike said, you're a team at the end of the day. So I'd hope that both my assistants were switched on throughout the match and they could make it aware to myself. I think, again, just coming over for a conversation. If we need to, if you're dead certain with yourself, and I think, as John said, you're putting yourself out there, and again, you're only going to it's only going to be, no, we've got it wrong, mixed up, and we crack on with the game kind of thing. And sometimes the players might be like, why have you even gone for a conversation? But if it is a game-changing decision and we do get it right, then that will be fantastic. So I think, again, just over a conversation, if we need to check through match record, because the worst thing to do would be to get into the changing room and then for you to stick your heads up and go, oh no, you booked that player twice. It's like, well, we could have had that conversation. We could have had that conversation out on the pitch, and now we're probably going to have a gaffer coming in asking, why have we not done this? And now we've both, as a team, we're now going to look not great. So I think the best opportunity to do it is just kind of at the time of it. If we need to have a conversation, I'll probably be coming over, because I'm not even sure if I've booked a player again. If we can deal with that and we can get it done before the game restarts, then that would look fantastic. So I think just a bit of honesty, again, calling myself over, have a conversation, and just cross-reference both our notes, and then just get the game underway if we need to go from there.
And I think at a level where all four of us operate without comms kits on our games, it just emphasises the importance of, when you're cautioning the player, being mindful of where is the assistant's view in proximity to seeing the player's number. Because it was different presumably it was different on Sunday, and that's just, or whenever it took place over the weekend, let's just use the assumption that the comms kits was working, and in that situation you would confirm the caution in the time immediate after it takes place. You don't have that luxury in our games. So you need to make sure that if you've given the responsibility to your senior assistant to take a full match record, when you're cautioning a player, they can actually see the number to take a full match record. Otherwise, the only opportunity you've got to really clarify books is 45 and 90.
And I think that's a big learning point. As I was thinking about this conversation, is I always found it a bit strange that at halftime you would just double check with everyone. I just thought, oh, this is a waste of time, but it's for this specific reason, right? Do you do that in all your games? At halftime, you just go around as a team and just double check and clarify? Yeah. Normal procedure, right? Okay, perfect. So that's something for the listeners, 45 minutes for like 30 seconds of your break at halftime, chat to each other and just clarify that you've got all the same yellow cards. And possibly even if you were the junior assistant and who hasn't been asked to take cards, maybe that's the time to make your notes there as well, because you could be really handy in the second half should anything else kick off. So brilliant.
In terms of the in-game situation and the assistant, raising the flag, bringing the attention of the referee to clarify something before play restarts, what's the worst that can happen in that situation? You lose 30 seconds of a game or 60 seconds of a game, and from my perspective, I'd much rather my assistant call me over. If it happened 10 times in a game, you'd be thinking, what's happened? But on that one occasion where he or she not quite sure if a caution has already taken place, just to go, that Mike, have you cautioned this person? Can you just clarify that for me? And you can go, no, I haven't. Or you can go, yes, I have. You've got me out a hole here. Actually, it's a second caution, and off we go. You know, I think for that 30 seconds of dialogue could save you a lot of heartache, really.
Brilliant. I think that's a great place to end. Red, Mike, thanks so much for joining. I hope you have a great game this weekend. To our listeners, to our viewers, thanks for joining in. I hope you found this valuable. We touched on 3 pretty interesting topics there from, you know, just what happened this week. So hopefully you're finding value in this, listening to this on your drive, on the treadmill, or watching it on your commute home. If you're interested in REFSIX, you should definitely download it. It will stop you from making that mistake. If you put that second yellow, it will tell you there's a red card on its way. So definitely try that out. But I hope everyone who's listening and watching has a great weekend of football, a great week of football, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.